Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're taking a look at a rotation DragonCraft list. This one I thought was quite nice. I actually quite enjoyed playing it. It's of course more focused on Apostle of Disdain and the Disdain Omen than some of my previous videos where Disdain wasn't quite as a major factor. Of course still using some big storm finishes. Personally, you probably don't want Zoe, you probably want another Irons and another Omen and Craving, but in my case Zoe fills the slot quite nicely. It gives me a little early draw, so I had a couple of those where I didn't have the other cards, and that worked out well for me. Everything else in this deck is super early game, which is always nice. Everything going up to turn 3 until you really hit your turn 4 Apostle, turn 5 Disdain, and then pretty much just roll from there. Everything else can be pretty easily rolled into one, and you're really just a matter of pressuring out your opponents. So this deck can do well against a multitude of decks. It's not surprising that Dragon is basically the number 2 deck at the moment, right behind Blood. Honestly, in some cases this can be even better than Blood, and that's not a big surprise. Apostle of Disdain is just such a big swing, along with the fact that you can do quite a bit of burn damage with Omen and get some nice finishes with Irons, and even Omen of Craving due to its ambush and drain effects, really helping you out. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this, and we'll get right into it. So our first game is going to be against Haven. These games are actually pulled straight from the Grand Prix, so it's a pretty decent representation of that at this stage, as I really couldn't be bothered going back through and trying to get games when I already had some lined up from Grand Prix that I had wins on anyway, so hopefully you guys can enjoy it. Plus, I think this is still fairly decent games overall, of course. I mean, even a lot of the low-ranking players these days have some pretty standard decks going around, as a lot of people seem to sit in the lower ranks so they can farm. Like, for example, this is a Lionhaven deck, which is still quite a solid deck, and one that you do have to be careful of. The potential damage for such a low-cost deck can be absolutely insane. So they've already started off the early Crystals and Seraphic Blade. This is going to be a fairly heavy game on our end, where we really just need to swarm the board as much as we can while going for damage. Of course, that does mean we need to deal with these lions. Peace Weaver, not exactly the funnest thing to have to deal with. Of course, Disdain Rend could deal with this if we wanted to on the 1-1, but I'd rather get face damage off that. And we also get the draw from the 2-2, so it really doesn't hurt to take advantage of that here. And Zoe for a draw and setup. And both our Izdrahars are both going to probably drop to 7 pretty easily, which is kind of where you want them because they can also combo with the Craving spell, which is pretty perfect for a nice 10 damage burst. Now, our opponent does a fairly decent job at cleaning this out. It's no surprise that Lionhaven has a fairly decent engine behind it. It's just the fact that this deck is a lot faster. This Dragon deck has so many solid options. Typically you want a mulligan for early game and then draw into late game, which is fairly easy, but sometimes you might want to hold on to the Omen or an Irons just in case you know your match will be a bit slower. But they're pretty rare occurrences, at least from what I've played so far. I've played a reasonable amount of this now. Enough that I was confident to go into Grand Prix with it. We did manage a 3-2 in Grand Prix rotation at that stage, which was fairly decent. I mean, by the time this video goes out to you guys, I'm pretty sure the Grand Prix will be close to over, if not over. But that's okay, it's still fairly representative of the meta as of making this video. The only match I wasn't able to get was Blood, unfortunately. I would have loved to have got that for you guys, but unfortunately there hasn't been a lot of Blood around lately. At least not on my ladder. The last 2 days I've faced maybe 4 Bloods. I've faced a lot more Dragon and Haven than anything. I feel like because those two counter pretty well, that's probably why. So they've really pumped out these lions at this point. But we only need 2 good turns. So a single Irons to face, which will mean they'll force trade into this, which is perfect for us. We have the second Irons to back us up if they don't clear it. Even with some healing, not really a problem. The only real trouble now is going to be these Lion Crystals, as they are going to pump their board up quite heavily. Luckily we've sticked ourselves at 20, so we're fine there. All we need to worry about now is going face. So I decided to stack the board because we're already on 9 play points. All we need to do is get to 10 to use the Eyes combo. So as long as they don't heal up any further, we should be fine. And with only 1 board slot available, they're definitely not killing us this turn. So there's a 12 damage burst. And our really sick Eyes Jahar into a Craving to finish the game for 10 damage. Always a nice one. So I actually did manage to find that I had a blood game on hand, which is pretty decent. This one wasn't in the Grand Prix, so this is just a standard ranked match. Hopefully you guys will be able to enjoy this. So we have Omen of Disdain, Splendor, and Disdain Apostle is pretty decent, but not really good for your opener, especially against Blood. You want a lot more early game cards, things that can remove potential damages here is really important. If you're not careful, it can be very difficult, but since we are going first, we do have a slight edge. That's a pretty tough Razor Claw. At least they kind of had to waste that on a follower and not going face. And now we can just start kind of stacking the board. That's what this deck is so great against Blood, as you can just throw a bunch of small things to the board and deal damage to your opponent's face without any worry at all. And your opponent can't really do a lot about it. And since you have such large bursts, they can't risk doing too much damage to their face, as pulling off a pretty sick burn is very easy. So typically I prefer Apostle of Craving on 6 or 7. If you do go 8 or more, you can get it a lot higher. But personally I find Disdain is quite nice just to play out in the kind of mid game as you're getting to your Ayers and to your Zoe plays. So we are just stacking this up. I wanted to go for a way to get rid of this Vera, and we also managed to ramp to 7, which means we do have Disdain available next turn as well, which is always nice. And of course led to a very, very quick concede. Just goes to show how dominant this can be. So we'll throw in another game here against Rune.
Shall we cross swords?
Rune's been fairly popular in the current meta, mainly because Mysteria and Friends does a pretty nice job, although it is a reasonably slow deck, which is where something like this comes in quite handy, being quite aggressive. Of course, that doesn't mean you'll win every game. If they do end up with a decent burn hand, you can be in some serious trouble. But I usually don't find that as too much of an issue. Especially when you can go Dragonute on 2, I find that's a pretty ideal play. A 1-3 on 2 is almost a perfect stat line. And of course the 2-2 play there is not really any kind of threat to us. Can they take advantage of its last word? Yes. Are they really going to get much out of it? Probably not at this point. As by the time they're able to use those, hopefully we'll have taken out most of their health. So we're curving out pretty well, going into some nice draw power, some decent ramp in the next turn, and some decent damage here. It's really just a matter of time before we can take these guys out. So Adorable Genius, that's a little bit of a problem as it is such a large drop, but White Frost is going to handle it pretty comfortably. Or Apostle of Disdain actually might be better, considering we can actually play the spell, get some little bit of damage out of it and go face. It's a little bit better than playing the White Frost in this situation, as we get the damage as well. And it forces the removal of this card now. Which is good for us because it means they waste burn spells removing big cost followers. So now we're really aiming just to get as quick damage as we can, so getting that Eyes Jahar is very important, and flooding the board with small things in case we draw into Craving. It's definitely a deck I've had some fun with. I can definitely probably go fairly well in Grand Prix with it. I'm looking at hopefully getting into Group A this time around. As I said, I make these videos reasonably in advance. Usually I'm about 5 days to a week ahead by the time these videos reach you guys. Allows me to have a little bit of time off as I'm making stuff, but that isn't always the case. So 10 damage to face, can't ask for a better bit of damage there, and there is their concede. So this is definitely a deck I'd recommend in the current meta. It does fairly well and is really quite aggressive, so That's always a good thing if you're looking for quick wins and a decent deck to play. Definitely go for this one. As always, the deck list will be in the description below. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Until next time, see ya.